Welcome to Game Savers Podcast, your next gen podcast for video game reviews, analysis, retrospectives, and all the lot. This week, we're not actually going to be talking about video games. We're going to be talking about movies based on video games. So let me just introduce everyone who's here this week. Obviously, myself, Wayne, you know me. I've got my co-host.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I usually save games on my memory cards.
Yeah. We also have Phil.
Hey, it's me, Phil.
And last but not least, Jim from Banterflix Podcast. Jim, do you want to tell us a little bit about Banterflix Podcast?
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me on. Yes, Banterflix Podcast. We are jack of all trades, masters of none. We've been running out this weirdly, this is our 10th year of existing. The podcast, podcasts and stuff haven't existed that long. But we're just basically a collective. I kind of describe myself as a kind of cult leader. I just haven't got around to asking for the money yet. But we're a cult. We've got about 8 core members. We do film screenings here in Belfast if and when we can get back to doing that. Remember that when you could actually go to the cinema, and we do the podcast where we, over the last year, have changed quite a bit. It used to be just kind of based on reviews each week, but now we've kind of we do a bit of Disney retrospectives. We do a crime scene to scene pod where we look at kind of real life serial killers in the movies. And then we have our own stuff, which is mostly me. We need to talk about movies. So yeah, as I said, it's jack of all trades, masters of none, but it's a lot of fun. And we don't take ourselves seriously at all, as you will probably gather as I start to ramble on this podcast.
That's a familiar story. I don't think anyone wants to listen to a podcast where 4 guys are taking themselves super serious.
I want
to. So, video game movies, they're known, generally speaking, to be garbage. They're not particularly well thought of, and a lot of the time they're made in such a way that it's basically the opposite of a passion project, and it's a money-making endeavor where they just pull in whatever names they can to make the movies. Some do stand out, some are better than others, and what we've decided to do is try and pick 3 movies that we feel are at least respectably made, at least decent movies, and worth watching. Movies that you don't get to the end of and think, there's 2 hours of my life I'm not getting back. The movies themselves are based on respectably good video games as well. So the 3 movies we're going to be talking about today are Resident Evil, Hitman, and Silent Hill. So let's just get stuck straight into this. First up, Resident Evil. We've all seen the first Resident Evil movie, yeah?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Generally speaking, what's our thoughts? Is it a good movie, decent movie, crap movie?
I think it's one of the better video game movies, in my opinion. Let me maybe get the negative out of the way first. I think, as you mentioned it earlier, it's really disgraceful to the source material. There are some things that are just inherently wrong with it, in my opinion. But still, this is the kind of movie, I watch it, I enjoy it. It gives me a little bit of fun. Could be worse. Could be the other Resident Evil movies.
I'd agree with that. What it took from the games was like minimal. We get the Umbrella Corporation and an underground facility. We get zombies, which is kind of part of the course. I mean, you wouldn't have a Resident Evil movie without zombies. And then there's one sort of big enemy, which is the liquor that's used. We don't get a single character from Resident Evil, so there's no Jill Valentine, there's no Claire Redfield, there's no, I think I got a few names mixed up there. You know, there's no Wesker, there's no Ada Wong, there's nothing
like this.
And is that a plus or a negative? I mean, do we think video games movies need to be accurate to the source material?
See, I think, and I know we were going to talk on this just kind of before we started to record, I think it's both a good thing and a bad thing for the Resident Evil game, that it does what it does. I know it kind of goes bonkers, and some of the characters you've mentioned do come into the later installments within the franchise. I can't remember, is there 7 or 8 films? There's been so many final installments.
6 in total,
so many final installments. I know they're rebooting it again, and they're going to be doing things like that, but I like the fact that it's not just the game, because I think that's a bad thing. And video game adaptations, for me anyway, that I've watched, halfway through it, you're left going, I've played this. Why would I bother watching it? And you're kind
Yeah.
of going, I think that is a big problem with video game adaptations, in the fact that you are playing in a video game, you're playing an active role in that with that character, and you form an emotional engagement and attachment with that character. Like we think of, I know we're not talking about right now, but Silent Hill and stuff later on, that really comes into play. And that's why the game break your hearts at time, as well as make you, I don't know what the expletive rating on this is, make you shit your pants at the same time. With
Swear
the
away, Jim.
Resident
Swear away.
with the Resident Evil stuff, and particularly the first one, looking back, and it was 2002, I think, it looks really 90s for a film that was out at the start of the 2000s, early 2000s. You've got Mila Jovovich. What's going to go wrong there? But I think there is some good standpoints to it. There is some good set pieces, and there's stuff I remember. Mila Jovovich's characters in Alice, she kicks a dog. What's not like, she does a roundhouse kick on a dog, and there's that stuff. The stuff that really stuck with me, with the Resident Evil film, is that sequence early on in the chamber with all the lasers.
Oh, I was just about to talk about this, but go ahead.
It's brilliant. But what I noticed when I rewatched this, and I rewatched Silent Hill, I have to hold my hand up. I didn't get a chance to rewatch the Hitman film, but I have seen it a long, long time ago. But what I noticed about it, I didn't pick up the first time I watched this, was like 18, 19 when I first watched it. I was there for Mila Jovovich, let's not lie. But how kind of very tame it is, in terms of, I think you compare this to Silent Hill, which has some really shocking, gory, almost too gory moments in its actual feature. You compare that to Resident Evil, like at times it does. I'm not sure what the certificate is. It a 12A? Is it a 15?
I think it's a 15.
I wasn't certain. I was kind of looking for it before I think, but I think at the same time, while it has some great moments, I think it does feel a little bit toothless, if you bar the pun for a zombie. I think there's a definite case of gingivitis going on there. There's not so much there's no real bite to it, but I think it's that nostalgia. I think it just missed me personally in the age. I was just slightly too old to really, for that film to hit me at the right time. But I think if I was 15, 16, I would have a lot more nostalgia for that. But I still think it's a lot of fun. It's a film you could happily have a beer, munch some chicken wings. We're just after the Super Bowl or whatever it is, and just kind of, and this is something, I know I'm going to get semi-serious. It's a film you can really shower your head with in its stupidity and its silliness. And I think with all the lockdown stuff and all the stuff it's films like, I don't want to watch, serious right now in this. I don't really want to watch serious kind of angsty dramas. I really enjoyed this type of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, it's not the season for Schindler's List. Sure, it's not.
Is it ever really has everyone ever really said, I feel like putting Schindler's List on?
Well, I've never watched it for that exact reason,
Oh, you never did, actually?
I've never seen it. No.
It's a good film, but would I ever turn around and say, you know what, you really need to watch Schindler's List? I wouldn't. On someone who's on a real high and stuff, I wouldn't even wish it on them. It's like someone who's had a real great day. It's like, you know what, watch Schindler's List. It's a fantastic film, telling a really important part of history, really dark part of history. And Steven Spielberg I love, but would I ever turn around and say, you know what, watch that? But would I say to someone, watch Resident Evil? Probably. Yeah, I'm not going to say it's going to win an Oscar. It definitely didn't. I'm not sure what kind of awards it won. But if you just want a bit of escapism, it's an hour and a half, go for it.
Yeah. Phil, what were your thoughts then on the original Resident Evil movie?
Yeah, so I was at the proper age to watch the movie. Like I was 15, 16 back in the day. And my expectations were just too fucking high, because I was a big fan. I still am a big fan of the franchise, and I kind of played Resident Evil once a day, like during the summer breaks, stuff like that. So I watched the movie and I was completely, utterly destroyed and disappointed, because I was thinking what the fuck did they do? Because I was expecting, because I read something in magazines previous and something, and they always said a mansion and an underground lab and stuff like that. I was thinking, yeah, nice. And there was no Jill Valentine, there was no Wesker, no Chris Redfield, no nothing. And all of a sudden, this model chick, which I haven't heard about, and I was thinking all right, cool. And after I watched it approximately 1,000 times, it grew on me. And it has its own aesthetics, and if you see it like this, like a movie based on a game, it's all right, but not as I wanted it to be, a movie,
sure,
or a game put into a movie.
One of the things that we're touching on there is, you know, how authentic it was to the video games, and this clearly wasn't. I've always had the opinion that when you do an adaptation of something, whether it be a video game or a comic or an old cartoon, anything like that, it either needs to be very, very authentic and respect the source material, or it needs to go all the way in the opposite direction to become its own thing. So although this thing is called Resident Evil, it's not what we play. It's its complete own thing. And I think in that regard, that's kind of what helped it. It just it didn't. Now it was weird because as you say, Phil, whenever you see the trailer, you see the mansion and stuff, and you're getting all these Resident Evil vibes. You're thinking, oh my god, they're actually doing it. They're going for the Spencer Mansion. They even had there's a train in it, and on the front of the train it says Alexei 5000. And that Alexei is a reference to one of the characters in Resident Evil Code Veronica. So when you start to see all these wee little things, you're thinking, oh, you know, it's a real fan that's made this. Someone that's made this movie's really into it. And then as the movie plays out, you kind of go, maybe not. I mean,
well, I think, isn't it like 40 minutes into the film before you see your first zombie? There's no, you mean?
Yeah.
It takes forever.
Yeah.
And even at that, I mean, the weirdest thing I think about this movie, the weirdest choice they made in writing it was that the main antagonist of this movie is essentially the AI that runs the hive. And I mean, refresh my memory if I'm wrong here, but I don't remember any AI from any Resident Evil game.
No, like I have played all the Resident Evil games. There was no AI whatsoever.
Yeah. that just seems a bit off.
Do you not think, though, in a weird way, and just kind of come back to what Phil said, like this idea of that you played the game, this, that, and then I come back to the thing I said, like, why would I then want to go watch Resident Evil when I've already played that? Do you not think, in a way, looking at it now, for me, enough time has passed? I mean, I was a Resident Evil fan, not diehard. I know I definitely had summers playing Resident Evil 2, and Nemesis. I definitely, and Resident Evil 4, I remember picking up on the Wii and loving it. But I didn't come into it like with a diehard level of fandom. And, you know, fans are fully entitled to that. But I think, in a way, what they tried to do, and what you can see what they've tried to do, is they've tried to flesh out that world. So what they're trying to say is the events of Resident Evil are maybe going on ahead, or going on whilst our films, kind of on the drama in our films unfolding. I think that's a good way to flesh out the world in a kind of way. Isn't that what they're doing with the Uncharted stuff as well? They've decided to go much younger Nathan Drake than what we've seen before, because they've kind of took the approach that they've said, look, people will have played those 3 games. Yeah, 3 games. They're not going to want to sit for an hour, 2 hours, and just go look back at the best bits of what they've seen before. I think there's positives to it, and there is kind of, if I was a fan at the right age and that film hit me, I would be disappointed.
You know, funny enough, it was last night that I watched it, and I was thinking exactly the point you've made there. The fact that there was no characters from the games in that movie could have been canon. You know,
it could have been, absolutely.
It could have sat alongside it. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case whenever they went on with the sequels and introduced all the sort of random aspects of the games. But yeah, it could have been, and as you say, this could have been just another facility under Raccoon City.
Yeah.
They could have spun it that way.
Just imagine they would have made it canon and then went like all above and beyond with the movies later on, and then you have to have like these, like, to be fair, shitty movies as canon in the Resident Evil universe.
Thank God we don't.
And Resident Evil has enough bullshit to fight with, which is canonized. Like, I honestly, Resident Evil 6. Like,
don't get me started, man.
So very briefly before we move on, favorite scenes and least favorite scenes from the movie. What would you go for?
Well, favorite scene, definitely like the one in the hallway with the lasers. That's one of the best scenes ever. Also, I just like how they, like, I just rewatched it a couple of days ago. The scene where I think the captain, I don't recall his name, is like being cut into like little squares, and then it like goes, makes him a little bit blurry, and you just see him fall apart in the front. Very cool scene.
That still stands up. I think. Despite that movie being 19 years old, that scene still looks great. I think it's really cool the way one of the guys jumps up to the ceiling and holds himself up, and his knife gets sliced through. Again, it looks cool, and it still looks cool. That guy that got diced up, I love even the positioning of the dicing, because it goes through his eye, and just before he slides apart, you see like the white of his eye sort of dripping down.
Yeah.
Visceral and
What I
brilliant.
also think is really funny about that scene specifically, if I remember it correctly, they kind of put this into Resident Evil 4, some sort of. Whereas Leon is going through a hallway, then some lasers coming up, and he's like doing all this like karate moves.
You got a QTE where he backflips like.
Oh yeah.
Art imitating art, imitating art.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what I would other say in terms of sequences I love, and it's one I had completely forgotten, just the opening. The cold opening when it's kind of the outbreak of stuff. I forgot just how, I'll probably say atmospheric it is. It's that sense that, as I say, you have all this stuff to start, and then it kind of goes away for like nearly half an hour, 40 minutes, and then comes back to that. But I forgot, like, that sequence in the elevator, that's tense. It's really, Paul Anderson, whether you like him or not, I mean, I have a real soft spot for Event Horizon. I really do. We screened it. I've screened it in the past. It's the only film that ever really made Latin cool for me. Liberate tutumi ex inferes. What can I say? That's probably the only Latin I'm ever really going to know, right? Yep. I forgot, he's someone who knows what he's doing within the horror genre. I just think, in a sense, because it is made by, it's such a studio property, it's been made to get as much, 15, as wide an audience as possible. I think if it was a little tougher, I think if it was an 18 certificate, I think it would maybe hold up a little bit more, apart from the liquor special effects, but let's not say about that. But the corridor sequence is great. Mila Jovovich kicking a dog. I think she took nearly 3 months to train for that. It still stands up. Yes, it looks a bit weird with the dogs, but I actually forgot how much I love that elevator sequence at the very, very start.
And I also think like the sequence at the beginning in the house, it really captures the atmosphere of the first game. When I think about it, like the first game, when you walk through the mansion and everything, I felt like that when Mila Jovovich was walking through the house. It's on top of the hive.
Yeah, I think another highlight for me personally was like literally the very, very last scene where she walks out of the hospital. She gets the shotgun from the cop car, and then they must have like a camera on reels, and it just pans right out and shows the whole city completely destroyed. And that to me reflects like the first few minutes, like the CGI intro of the Resident Evil 2 game. And you walk out of the cinema after that moment going, oh my God, we're getting Resident Evil 2, we're going to get that like outbreak in Raccoon City. I was really excited for that. Unfortunately, it didn't.
Do you not think though there's too many endings? Though the film really doesn't know how to end itself. I mean, I love that. I love that sequence, but there's so many times you could really fade to black here, like the sequence where she wakes up, she's in the hospital. Spoiler if you haven't seen it, but it is a long film, and it cuts out, and then it's being recorded, and then it cuts out a little bit, pulls out a little bit more, and then there's a zombie going past. You go, boom, that's it. Okay, it's a little bit of a downbeat ending, and then you have other things. It didn't know how to end itself. But yeah, like if I'd been coming out of the cinema watching that and someone handed me a PS1 controller and said, there's Resident Evil 2, it's like, yep, thank you very much. I'm going to sit and play this now.
Let's go. I think for the most part that's us done with Resident Evil. I think we should move on. Movie number 2, which is Hitman. Now there's 2 Hitman movies. There's the first one that came out in 2007, and then it was a sequel called Hitman Agent 47,
which I just found out today, and that's such a bummer.
Yeah, so Alex watched the wrong movie, but
I'm sorry.
We will carry on regardless. It's directed by a guy called Xavier Gaines. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. And the only actor in it that I'm particularly familiar with is Timothy Oliphant, who plays the titular Hitman himself. He is an actor that I only know from a TV show called Santa Clarita Diet, which is one of the silliest TV shows I've ever enjoyed. And it made it difficult at the start to kind of, take this super serious hitman guy that's completely emotionless and dead. Quick run through the plot, quick synopsis. It's basically about a hitman who's been trained from a child, and one of his jobs is to take out a Russian president. He takes out the Russian president only to find out that the Russian president is not dead, and so there must have been a body double or something. It's all been covered up. And upon finding this out, a lot of his colleagues, other hitmen from the same organization that he works for, start trying to hunt him down. That's kind of it in a nutshell. It kind of goes on. It gets a wee bit more convoluted over that. But what do you think? Any of you guys seen this one?
Yeah, sorry, I've just seen it yesterday, and
Yep.
so like it's really fresh in my memory. And I have to say, like, this movie tries a lot of things at once and doesn't succeed in any of it, because like yeah, like if you watch it, also has like this naughty aesthetics to it, like where it's not too far away from like a Fast and Furious movie, and also like not too far away from a James Bond, but tries to be as much James Bond as it gets, like, to be honest. And yeah, like there's a lot of things which kind of like bummed me out watching the movie, but it's not bad, like, but it's also not good.
I would agree with that. I didn't get to the end of it and sort of think I regret watching that. I thought it was a decent movie. I thought it was fairly enjoyable. As you say, there's so many other movies that it's trying to be. It's trying to be a James Bond movie. It's trying to be a Bourne Identity style movie. But it clearly doesn't have the budget for that sort of thing. Jim, you were about to pipe in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I have seen this a long time ago. I didn't get a chance to rewatch it before the pod. I know I've seen it. I can't remember a lot of it, but kind of what Phil's saying, I agree with. It's a film that's borrowing heavily from a lot of things we've seen before. And that's, that's kind of what video games have done before. Come back to that thing. I know I'm a broken record. The difference is you're playing an active role in the video game, but instead you're just sit back and watch it. So in a film, so you're more forgiven, I think, when something borrows heavily. I think Timothy Olyphant he looks the part in the role. I think, I don't really know why they felt the need to reboot it. I don't know what the first one did so wrong that rather than do a sequel, might just have been casting, might just have been cost, that it was just cheaper to do the reboot, which I know I have seen and I thought was terrible. I would say kind of steering a little bit back to zombiness, but Timothy Olyphant, if you haven't seen him in much, I would definitely recommend seeking out the remake of George Romero's The Crazies, kind of zombie-ish, and he's great, and that's a really good remake. It's fine, it's serviceable. You're going to forget you've watched it. And I think a lot of the time, I think Phil mentioned, you'll want to wish you're watching a James Bond movie. You'll want to wish you're watching something else. But yeah, it's none of the films we're talking about tonight are terrible. I think this is the weakest because a game like Hitman, I don't know what you guys think. I love the Hitman stuff. I'm terrible at them. I always try to go for the super elusive, kind of super sly kills and just end up just failing horribly. Because you would just go, when you're watching, particularly the two Hitman games, you go, I wouldn't have done it like that. I wouldn't have done it like that. That's not how I would have done this. But yeah, they're fine. I think Timothy Olyphant is probably the best thing. And the girl in it, I think, is one of the Bond girls from Quantum of Solace. And it's solid.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think it's one of those movies. Now, I don't play the Hitman games. I played one of them quite a while ago. And I think sometimes there's an advantage to not playing the games and then watching the movie, because you're not sitting there constantly nitpicking and going, oh, they've changed that, they've changed the other thing, this isn't accurate to the games. You're just taking it as a movie in its own regard. And the only thing I was really pulling from my knowledge was basically the aesthetic of what the Hitman looks like. The shaved head, the barcode, the red tie, and the suit. One thing I did find out though is that the whole idea of in the video games is that these hitmen are clones. So the organization that runs all this is cloning people and turning them into hitmen. Kind of a bit like, I guess there's a Star Wars element there with the clone troopers and whatnot. They changed that. There's like an intro sequence that sort of gives you some flashbacks, and it's clear that they're sort of abducting children and then turning them into hitmen. And I know that, like, diehard fans of certain things will just lose their mind when they change details like that. One other wee thing I did like about this was that other movies, I mean, specifically the other movies we're talking about, Resident Evil and Silent Hill, they are absolutely, without a doubt, story driven. and it is just 100% story driven. This is the only movie out of those three that I think has a wee bit of a character arc, in that, you know, we start off with the Hitman character, and he's just dead behind the eyes, no emotion, merciless killer, does his job, gets out, that's it. But he seems to get a little bit of an attachment to this girl that he meets, and starts to show a little bit of emotion. And although it's only a little bit, it does show that wee bit of character development, you know, that these experiences, he's a different character at the end of the movie than he was at the start of the movie. And I don't think we'll really get that in a lot of video game movies because they're so story driven.
Suppose though, with a character like 47, it's easier to do that. Look, he is a husk of a character. There's not much there. He's just an assassin. You know, the fact that you probably can fill in the blanks, and probably the kind of thing you're talking about there, about changing the kind of the start, and instead of being clones, they're just orphans that have been abducted. That's just been a producer just saying, hang on, how much are we going to have to spend to get so many Timothy Oliphants on screen? As much as I'd love to see that, you know, my man crush and old Timothy would maybe not be able to take that level of Timothy on screen. That's just a producer just kind of saying, right, that works on a game. It's not going to work realistically within our budget. And that's a good thing. I think sometimes filmmakers forget the limitations of their budgets, and they reach far too high. And I think the reboot / sequel is definitely guilty of that. Like, there's a whole sequence involved. I vaguely remember, but you're probably going to remember, Alex, because you watched that instead. Is there a sequence near the end, and there's loads of cars kind of coming through, and you go, the CGI looks a bit naff.
Yeah.
And you go, you just don't get your budget.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, I haven't seen the first one, so I cannot say anything about this. But the second one, I always had the feeling this movie wanted too much for the budget that it had. There were a lot of really cool ideas in it, but just executed in, I wouldn't say bad way, but just within the constraints of the money that they have accessible.
Yeah. There was a few things within the Hitman movie that I noticed as I was watching it. One thing I hate in a movie is like choppy cuts during an action sequence. It drives me mad. There's a sequence in, I think it's Taken 2. It's one of the Taken movies with Liam Neeson.
Taken 2.
Where
I remember.
He jumps over a fence, right? And if you count the cuts, there are 17 cuts, just him climbing over a fence. I mean, that's insane. That is just the most mental way to cut a movie. There was a fight scene in a train on this where they've all got the guns pointed at each other. It's like a Mexican standoff, and I'm not sure what happens. They seem to give each other a bit of a nod, as in, like, you know, let's do it the old-fashioned way, and they all drop their guns and they pull swords out. And I was watching that, and now it's not perfectly edited, but you can see what's happening when someone takes a swing for someone. You know they're taking a swing for, and I'm sitting going, you know, this is I prefer this style of editing and this style of cutting whenever it comes to an action sequence. So I was giving it props for that. And then at the end of the movie, like the final fight between Agent 47 and I think it's the president himself, have a bit of a fisticuffs.
Fisticuffs, nice.
it's back to that cut, chop, shaky cam, can't see what's happening. And I'm sitting going, how are these two scenes so disjointed within the same movie? And I went and looked it up, and it turned out they'd done a whole lot of reshoots with a different director, and it all got slotted into the middle.
Okay.
So if the movie feels like a mess, that's potentially why. I would say it seemed like the right decision because we got that better scene in the train, but it does leave the movie feeling a wee bit, you know, the direction in one scene doesn't match with the direction in another scene, and that can just pull you out of the movie. You know, you realize you're sitting in your sofa watching a movie rather than, you know, being absorbed in that fight scene or whatever. So bit of a shame. I think there was potential there. I think maybe one day, given the right directors, if these, I mean, there's upcoming movies that are big budget. We've got an Uncharted movie, which is big budget. We've got a Borderlands movie, and judging by the cast, I would say that's big budget as well.
Yeah, but it's Eli Roth though. It's Eli Roth though.
God.
And also Kevin Hart, like completely cast in the wrong role, in my opinion.
Yeah,
but hey, let's see.
They've got Kevin Hart as Roland. So the one serious character in Borderlands, and they cast Kevin Hart. What's going on there? But
how long have we been saying this though? Like, I remember we have one of our team members who's not as active with us now as he used to be, Lee Forgy, and I remember he wrote a piece for us on the website about this. This is going to be the year when video games take over. It's moved away from comic book movies, and it's going to be back to video games are going to take their place. We had like, it was like the year of World of Warcraft kind of coming out and all that kind of stuff. And it just didn't materialize. So I mean, I've given up the ghost. Like, I know isn't there talk of a Metal Gear Solid film? I think that's kind of progressed.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah, it's been on and off. It made some progress in 2 years ago, but it's been dead silent ever since. So
when I was like 13, 14 playing that game, if you'd asked me then, do you want a Metal Gear Solid movie? Yes, please. I would happily go see it. Now I'm nearly 40. No, because the plot's just bonkers and kind of what you're going to have to do for Liquid and Solid. I don't know. I think the best way forward, I'm intrigued with the Uncharted stuff, but some of the best video games I've seen, or video game movies I've seen, isn't necessarily based on a title that we've all played. It's based around either something fictitious or about video game playing. That's kind of what, because I think if you can understand that and how video gamers work and how their heads work and how they interact on screen, they're great. Although I will hold my hand up at this point and say probably the best one in my opinion today is Detective Pikachu, because for just something that's just taking its source material and going with it and opening out. That's my own humble opinion.
Yeah.
I went off on a tangent there. I apologize.
no worries at all.
I always have the feeling when they announce like some new video game movie, the first thing that comes to my head is always like, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up, over and over again.
Like I'm the same with,
and then they do.
Yeah, I'm the same with like The Last of Us. I don't want a video game I don't want a film of The Last of Us. And I know they're kind of talking about now they're going to do the Uncharted thing. They're going to flesh out the world and they're going to have another story. Apparently, I think it's a TV series. It's not a film. I think they're doing with that. And
The Last of Us is going to be HBO series, actually.
If HBO can do it, anybody can. But
I was under the impression that the Last of Us TV show was going to be like pretty much retelling the first game.
Nope.
Which is what you've said it before. You're going to sit there watching it, going, "I know this story. I know how it ends."
Look, The Last of Us broke my heart. Genuinely broke my heart. Like the opening prologue of that really broke me. And then just kind of going through it. Yeah. I haven't got round to playing the second one. I know a couple of people have mixed feelings towards it. I intend to get around to playing it, but I want to play it when we're not kind of locked down and in isolation and it's not all doom and gloom, because I don't think I could handle it genuinely.
Yeah, The Last of Us 2 is a really depressing game. If you thought the first one was hard to take in, don't play the second one, seriously. There is a lot of really, really heavy stuff in there.
I personally think it's one of the best games ever made.
Agree. 100%.
Totally.
Yeah. The point, rewinding about 10 minutes, the point I was making there was if these video game style movies start getting bigger budgets, I think if they took Hitman and gave it the budget of a Bond movie or a Bourne movie, and put the right director on and the right writers in and got a good cast on, I think that is an exceptional opportunity for a video game movie. But I think it needs, well, like any movie, it needs the right team. And it needs the right people on board, and it needs to respect the source material.
But with Hitman, it would have been so easy because you don't have to stick to this so much of the source material. Like you got like the backstory with like the clones and all that jazz. But like all in all, like he's on a mission, does something like whatever, and then you can give him like the proper Bond treatment. Like you said, like with a bigger production base, it would work out. And like with the Resident Evil games, where you have like so much source material, where you have to be like true to the material, where you don't have to be in the Hitman games. Like,
I think this is probably one of the games or one of the franchises where you can actually deviate from the games a lot, because you have there's so much untold stuff in the Hitman universe, so many untold stories, because he's pretty secretive, and the only game where you get to know him a little bit better is the original second Hitman game from it was like, I think, late 90s, early 2000s or something. But yeah, so much potential. I think they just should get some people, some writers from the games to actually write a movie and help produce the movie. That would be the bomb.
But do you think it's weird then that you have peeps who've made the most recent Hitman games are now making a Bond origin. There's, I'm not, I'm intrigued to see what they do with that, because there hasn't been a lot of great James Bond video games. No, there hasn't. Oh well, GoldenEye and then
Sorry, I was just about to say.
Sorry, everyone's like, you said what?
No. But yeah, I know I went sacrilege there. That's going way back. But of recent years, there hasn't been a lot of.
Yeah, that's right.
Wasn't there the Quantum Solace game, which was developed by Triarch?
Yeah, there was this game from Treyarch that you borrowed to me that I never returned. I'm so sorry.
I think I got 1 or 2 games which I never returned to yet either. So. Halo 3.
That's right. Oh yeah. So yeah, I think it was basically just like a Call of Duty reskin. It was not that bad, but it was not that good either. Yeah.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, we have left the best till last.
Yes,
Silent Hill,
definitely
a franchise that a lot of gamers have a lot of time for and a lot of respect for. Someone who has a lot of time and a lot of respect for those games is the director himself, Christoph Gans. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He wanted to make this movie, so it wasn't like, a producer somewhere decides that we're going to make a video game movie and then we've got to find a director and find a writer. He had this planned. He wanted to do this. And what he actually done was he set up his video camera in front of him and he recorded an interview with himself, saying that he wanted to make this movie and why he wanted to make his movie and what his plans were. And then he sent it off to studios and it finally got greenlit and he got to make his movie. To me, that is just a massive tick in the box right off the bat. Someone who understands the source material, has a passion for the source material and wants to make the movie and isn't just doing it for a paycheck. We're off to a flying start.
Definitely.
It stars Radha Mitchell, Sean Bean, Laurie Holden, and a bunch of other actors that I'm not overly familiar with. Of course, I'm familiar with Sean Bean, but we'll touch on Sean Bean's involvement in the story in a bit. The synopsis of the movie is basically there is a family with a daughter who keeps sleepwalking, and whenever she sleepwalks, she keeps saying the words Silent Hill over and over again. So the mother does a bit of research and sneaks off to investigate this town of Silent Hill. She finds the town. It's an incredibly disturbing, weird, sort of pseudo-haunted town, and she chases after what looks like her daughter. We find out it isn't quite her daughter. There's a subplot about a mine accident that happened in the town, and you find out there's a cult being run there, and the story plays out. You find out more. We'll probably talk a wee bit of spoilery stuff whenever we get talking about this. I'll let you guys go first. What did you think of this movie?
It's, in my opinion, the best video game ever made, whatever ever was made, hands down. I think it's so close to the source material, and you can really tell, but just by the way the story has been told, the film has been made. This is from a fan, and also he could get Akira Yamaoka, the composer of the video games, to make the score for the movie. So this is a huge plus again. This makes it feel coherent, and even though there are like slight changes from the games itself, there are also some seeds that could be one-to-one from the first Silent Hill game, and that's just A-okay in my book.
Absolutely. There's the whole sequence from the girl arriving in Silent Hill in the car, nearly having the car crash, getting out of the car, walking into the town and finding that these roads just stop and fall off to nothing. Then starts going down little side streets. You get that swooping camera under the, like, through the alleyways. It's like, as you say, identical to the movies. She ends up in like this caged off area where like sort of like deformed babies try to attack her, and then bang, she wakes up somewhere else. All that is like, that's the game. That is the first hour.
100%. Yeah, that's why I love this movie so much, because
and to me, I've already said I think this is the best video game movie, but those 10 minutes are the best video game segment in a movie. It is just absolutely brilliant, and as you say, it sets the mood. They've got the music right. It's that sequence is 10 out of 10 for me. I love that. 11
out of 10 would watch again.
Jim, Silent Hill then, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree with all what you're saying. I'm not as the fact that it is so close to the source material is an issue for me. I think the fact that the director is such a fanboy is an issue for me, and the fact that he is guilty a lot through the film of serving up a lot of fan service, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but I just think there's a film that's based around set piece, moving to set piece. I think it's like the Whammo scale they used to call it in the 80s. It's where like you kind of move the action on to another set piece, to another set piece, to another set piece. And the set pieces are all from there. It's not just okay, it's very loosely based on the first Silent Hill. There's a bit of Silent Hill 2, a bit of Silent Hill 3 in there. Pyramid Head, who's not in the first one, is here. He looks great. They've visualized him perfectly. The visuals are great. I just think the narrative itself, the thing that connects all the dots, is a bit threadbare. It's a bit derivative. Okay, the positive Sean Bean doesn't die this time. How many times do we have to sit through a film and watch Sean Bean die? But yeah, there's things I like about it. There's times when you look at it and I think I mentioned this earlier on. There's a toughness to it. There's a toughness to it. There's some real shocking, gory moments that really kind of make you sit in your seat. Still now, from a film that was in 2006, still hold up. I just think, going back to what you guys just said, that sequence with the babies, and kind of, as much as I love the noise of that siren, I mean, that still sends a shudder down my spine from playing the game. Just the little opening bit of the music at the start of the film is enough to kind of go, okay, yeah, I know what I'm going for. I did miss Harry, but then I'm glad they didn't go outright for a remake. I think it's interesting. I think that the producers, they switched the gender of the protagonist because they thought Harry was too effeminate. I'd love to see that now. I mean, I don't know why, the fact that we have a father figure who's so concerned about his daughter and is such a care. I have issues with that now in 2021, the fact that can't be a thing, and it's kind of, but anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
One of the things I was going to bring up to touch on that, the original script didn't have any men in it. Sean Bean wasn't meant to be there, and his story, if you watch the movie, every time it cuts to Sean Bean's story arc, it feels completely pointless. It adds nothing to the movie.
Yeah.
And the reason that's in there is because they done the script, they sent it off to the studio, and the studio was like, "There's no men in this. You have to have men in your movie," which I think is it's backwards. It's perfectly fine to have.
It really is.
But then again, with just women in it.
But then again, different times. It was a lot more man focused back in the day. I mean, it's 15 years ago. Would it go like this today? I don't think so. But yeah, that's just the landscape that was around at that time.
But I also have to see that, like, in between the last 15 years, a lot of things changed. Like, all of our views, like, my view sometimes, like, from, like, changed 180 degrees, like how I watch things now compared to how I did it, like, 15 years ago.
Yep.
So if I would have read, like, 15 years ago, like, they just cast Sean Bean to have a man in the movie, I would have been like, yeah, all right, like, fair enough, they need a man. Nowadays, I would be like, what? How? Why do you need a man in this movie? Like, he does nothing to the movie. He doesn't support the movie.
Yeah.
Like, and he gets kind of like thrown away in the sequel. So.
Yeah.
I think the addition of him was actually more like to explain what was going on there. It fills a little bit of the backstory gaps, but that's the thing. I think the game worked because there were a lot of gaps, and you have to fill in the blanks on yourself. I think the movie would have benefited from it, in my opinion, at least.
Jim, you touched on the fact that it feels like it jumps from set piece to set piece. I don't necessarily disagree with that. Personally, I thought the flow from set piece to set piece was fine, except for one. And although I liked the scene with the nurses, I didn't understand why it was there, other than, aren't the nurses cool from Resident Evil or from Silent Hill 2? Let's put them in that, because I don't think they were even, if memory serves me right, they weren't in a hospital or anything at that stage of the story.
No.
So, it just.
No, they were at a hospital, but it was like completely different. The thing is, the nurses and every monster in every Silent Hill game, they have like a purpose. Pyramid Head in Silent Hill 2 was the personification of the guild of
Yeah.
James Sunderland. The nurses was a suppressed sexual desire that he couldn't fulfill because his wife was dying. So it doesn't make any sense that either the Pyramid Head or the nurses are in the movie. It's just, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
I think, no, I disagree with you on Pyramid Head, because I'm sure, I can't remember what the girl's name was. Was it Diane in the movie? She's lost her daughter, Sharon, so she's going to be feeling guilty about losing her daughter. So that might kind of match up with Pyramid
yeah,
Head.
but the thing is, the Pyramid Head was actually just James's personification. If you played other games, every time there is some guilt going on, the personification looks entirely different. So that's why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the plot, I thought, using although it was a little boy in the game, Sharon and the other girl were kind of like the split identity of the girl that was burned by the cult, and that comes directly from the movie again. I just think that served the movie really well. I thought that was a good plot to put in there. And again,
yeah, I think it's, as I say, I have nothing against it. I think it's perfectly serves all of the three films we talked about on this pod. They're all perfectly serviceable. I just think for me, and it's kind of come back to kind of what we're chatting there about Pyramid Head and stuff, and even the nurses showing up. I think the film is too guilty of fan service in trying to feel the pressure to give fans what it thinks they want and what they need to see in screen. Oh, the nurses, remember them, Pyramid Head, remember him, all that kind of stuff. Remember the sequence with the babies. And I think it does that. And it means then that the narrative, that the DNA that connects A to B to C, et cetera, is just really clunky and derivative. And it's fine. It's just, I think, had they stepped back and tried to, again, what we've all kind of talked with all three films here tonight, is if they tried to do something that fleshed out the world of this video game that we're all coming, that we all have a lot of love for, I think it would have benefited the narrative much, much more, rather than trying to just give fans what it thinks they want. I think that's why I have a problem with the fact that the director is such a fanboy. Although, let's be honest, Silent Hill Revelations, it's directed by MJ Bassett. It's, you know, it's Shakespeare. The first Silent Hill is Shakespeare in comparison to Shakespeare, in comparison to Silent Hill Revelations.
Yeah, the second one was a huge letdown, and it was in production forever. So when it was finally released, I was really stoked for it. But yeah, it doesn't hold up. Like, it's
I confess
really
I missed
bad.
that one, but
what I will say, MJ Bassett knows what she's doing with horror. She knows what she's doing with horror, but again, she's in the confines of a supposedly mainstream blockbuster feature. You know, okay, again, it doesn't really have its budget, but she knows what she's doing with horror. It's just that the narrative is so clunky, and then it also feels the need to kind of solve everything and wrap everything up from the first film as well. We have Sean Bean coming back. We have the protagonist for this film. I think she comes back very much near the end of Revelations as well. It's been a long time since I've seen it. It's not a great film. I wouldn't say you have to sit down and seek it out by any means.
Yeah.
And seeing as you're not going to plug it, I'll do it for you. On the Banterflix podcast, there is an interview with MJ Bassett. So if you're interested,
yes,
go check that out.
Yeah, she's great. I'd love to love the film. I was talking to her, Rogue. I'd love to be able to be more positive about the film that I was interviewing her about. But yeah, she's an interesting person. She again, she loves the horror genre and all that kind of stuff. So seek it out. It's on the YouTube page.
Yeah. Well, that is pretty much our three movies covered. I thought that was good fun. I enjoyed working through those.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. If we'll go around the table, if you had to go and watch one of these movies, which movie would it be, Alex?
Silent Hill.
Yeah. And Phil?
Yeah, Resident Evil.
Resident Evil, yeah.
You just had to say that. You're like contractually obligated to say that as a Resident Evil super fanboy, right?
And Jim, what would be your highlight of the three?
I think it's pretty obvious. Mila Jovovich kicks a dog, roundhouse kicks a dog. You've got to go for Resident Evil all the way.
I would actually say, do watch through the 5 of the 6 Resident Evil movies.
I have a real soft spot for 2. I think it's because it has Nemesis in it, and it kind of brings it. But it's the one I haven't seen in the longest. But it was one of the because I didn't see Resident Evil. I think I saw Resident Evil on a really dodgy version that someone got sent at a kind of car boot sale. Going, there's Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 I got to see in the cinema, and Yeah, it's got Nemesis.
The first time I seen Resident Evil 2, I was absolutely disgusted by it. I couldn't believe that Nemesis was just some big dude on stilts with a big horrible rubber mask on.
It's a bit
But-
like Bane in Batman Forever.
But see, once you accept
Oh,
it,
yeah.
once you accept it for what it is. I mean, it's Resident Evil 2's got a lot more humor than the first one, and it's a laugh. I actually really enjoy Resident Evil 2 now, and the story of Alice kind of getting the powers and becoming essentially a superhero through those movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Them eventually bringing Wesker in. There's a scene, and I think it's the fourth movie, where they're in like a shower block. There's water falling. There's a song being played by a perfect circle, and there's one of the enemies with a big hammer.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah. I think it was the fourth or the fifth one. I don't remember actually, but it was. And they also recreated a couple of scenes from Resident Evil games. One from Code Veronica, one from Resident Evil 5, a fight scene that you had there from the DLC. Yeah.
Like you remember the hammer? He was in 5. Or he had an X.
Is it 4 or 5? Is the first one in 3D? Because I remember seeing one specifically in 3D.
That's 4.
I can't remember.
That's 4. Yeah, 4 was the first one.
I
With
think
the third person.
Yeah. Code Veronica, but like with
all right.
third person view, it's 4.
I think isn't 3's like kind of the Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome kind of vibes. It's kind of set out all in the desert, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe they go to Vegas and it's basically been flooded, but with sand.
Yeah. See, this podcast isn't good for me because I have been hemming and hawing about going back and rewatching all the Resident Evil movies. And I'm kind of now like, you know what? I think it's like, that's it. It's like that episode of The Simpsons when Homer's wanting to go to clown college. Like, that's it. You've held me back long enough. I'm going to go watch all of the Resident Evil movies.
I would do it.
I'm sorry.
In a flash if it wasn't for the 6th one. I thought the 6th one was awful. Yeah. And I remember seeing it in the cinema and thinking, well, at least this is it. At least it's over. And if we're getting any more movies, it's going to be a reboot or whatever. And the very last
they said that
line,
after the 5th one. They said that after the 5th one as well.
The very last line of that movie is Mila Jovovich walking away from the camera, and she says, "I thought this was the end of my journey. It's only the beginning." And I put my head in my hands. It was just like, no.
But look,
let it end.
But look, here's the thing:
the plaster off and just let this go.
But here's the thing: like they're rebooting Resident Evil now, and it's supposed to be more in line with the video games. Any expectations for this?
Alex, I've talked to you about this before, and like I don't even watch trailers. As soon as I know that I want to see a movie, I go media blackout, because I want as much of the story and as much of the movie to be a surprise as possible. There's been so many movies that, if I talked about the Blade Runner, the reason I thought Blade Runner, what was the sequel called? Blade Runner
2049.
2049.
Like, there's a scene in that, right, where Harrison Ford's standing in the background, and he's purely in shadow, right? And the protagonist is having a conversation with him, and then he steps out of the shadow, and you can tell the way that's been written and the way that that's been shot, that's meant to be a reveal, and you're meant to be, oh my God, it's Deckard, right?
But then it's like in the first trailer.
But he's on the posters and everything, so we know he's going to be there. So it's almost like the movie has spoiled a moment within itself already. So I completely avoid trailers when possible.
I agree with you. You know, I don't have an issue with the Blade Runner one. The worst one I can think of in recent memory, and it's not a great film, so I don't have any real love for or hate for. I don't have any love for anyway. Was Terminator Genesis? If you remember, it kind of doesn't exist anymore now in the weird kind of timelines. But they had the whole reveal. Sorry, listeners. Sorry, viewers. That John Connor was back, but this time he was a Terminator. He was evil, and it's right there in all the posters. It's right there in all the trailers. And they treat that in the film like it's the biggest reveal ever, the biggest thing since sliced bread, and you're left kind of going, like, I fucking knew that was going to happen because it was in the trailers.
In fact, that's why we're here.
Yeah, you know, we always talk about this in the pod, on our own pod. Trailers will lie. Marketing men and women will sell their soul in order to get you to buy a ticket to something you see. And the best thing you can, if there is, as you've kind of said, Wayne, if there's something you really want to see, and it's been harder, I know, for a couple of films because they're being delayed because of COVID, is to stay away from trailers, ad spots, everything as much as you can to go in to have, you know, as much of a kind of proper old school cinematic experience as you can. Trailers they give away far too much these
Yeah.
days.
Well, what I was going to say, there was I don't watch the trailers, but for some reason, this Resident Evil reboot, I looked up some behind the scenes shots, and it sent shivers up my spine, and it was like,
Oh, really?
my god, we're getting
I
the Resident Evil movie I want.
I
So-
haven't watched those like at all. I still want the movie that John Romero was doing. No, not John Romero. George Romero. John Romero was the guy
Johnson's
who,
brother.
Yeah.
George A. Romero.
George A. Romero. Thanks a lot. Yeah. He made that Resident Evil 2 at commercial like back in the day, and I still want the movie like in this style. But yeah, never gonna happen.
But here's my thing, right? See, if you want a really good Resident Evil movie, just what we're kind of saying, just watch George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Watch any of those kind of zombie films. That's the thing, because Resident Evil, it does, as much as it tries to do its own thing, it does borrow heavily from stuff that has been done before. So if you're looking for a great Resident Evil film, just watch Night of the Living Dead, watch Dawn of the Dead, you know, that type of stuff. That would be my thing, because I think just in kind of what you're saying about your you've already got your expectations high now, Wayne, for this Resident Evil movie that's going to come out.
Off like vaccine photo. You know?
One movie still. So then that film right now can only disappoint you. Yeah. It might not, but it could only disappoint you. Expectations are a horrible thing.
We've talked a lot recently about high expectations and being let down within the video game industry, you know. Cyberpunk.
It worked out fine. I don't know.
Hey, I haven't got over Metal Gear Solid 2. That's all I'm going to say. That's when it all went downhill for me. That's when I find that marketing men, people really lied. Metal Gear Solid 2. Oof, yeah. How much I hate Raiden still. Sorry, it's still touching. It's still an open wound. Sorry.
Yeah.
If we ever do a Metal Gear retrospective, then we know who to give a shout.
But if you want to watch a good Resident Evil movie, you can still watch the animated ones, like Degeneration, Damnation, and that one Exaggeration. I don't know which one it was. Like the third one was a bit over the top, but the first two ones.
They're pretty canon. Phil, out of the three of those, if you had to watch one, what one would you recommend?
Degeneration, the first one.
Degeneration, the first one. I think I might watch that myself at some stage.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Because like it's still like plausible and believable, like in the Resident Evil universe. Like the third one got a bit like really campy and over the top. Like it's kind of like went to like the Hollywood movies where they just did like fucking like 3 backspins in a row and kicked 50 zombies in the head and shot like everybody almost to pieces like in one scene. So
come on, it's Leon. He does that.
I think there is. I know we're like going off on another tangent again here, but I think there's a different level of, you know, suspension of disbelief with animated stuff than there is with live action stuff. You know, one good example I think is a lot of the holes that are poked in like recent Star Wars movies. Anyone I know that's watched like the Clone Wars series, they don't pick anything up like that in any way near the level they do of the live action movies. And I think a big part of that is the fact that, you know, it's a cartoon, so you just kind of, you relax your brain a little more and you just kind of let things roll, and it's less of a that wouldn't happen, that couldn't happen, this doesn't make sense sort of scenario. And so maybe video game movies would lend themselves better to CGI movies or animated stuff.
Yeah, look how well Final Fantasy worked out. No, but I will say this in all seriousness, no, kind of anime kind of style and animated movies. I know I was talking, I think it was pre-record, we were talking about, I've been replaying over lockdown the Dead Space games and kind of going, when I was younger, I want a Dead Space movie. No, I don't, but I do love, I think it's Downfall and Aftermath, I think, that were released.
Okay, they were actually pretty decent.
They were fillers. They were there to kind of sell the video game. They were there to sell Dead Space and Dead Space 2, or maybe Dead Space 2, Dead Space 3. I'm not quite certain. But I enjoyed those because they filled in, as you were kind of talking about earlier on, guys, that filled in the blanks of things. And because I think it doesn't have to be, you don't need, you know, live action practical effects. You don't need really top end CGI because it's all animated. It's all on the same level. It's probably easier to get away with than trying to do something like a real life kind of, you know, and kind of, with, as I said earlier on, like top end CGI practical effects. That's going to cost a lot of money if you're doing that with Dead Space. Animated is a much more cost effective way to go.
Maybe that's
yeah.
also a reason why Castlevania is such a success and also such a good show in
Yeah,
itself.
that's right.
Yeah. I think stuff like that we sometimes forget about. If you asked someone, would you like to see a Mass Effect movie? They probably wouldn't turn around and say, well, there was one, but we did have that animated Mass Effect movie. Can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I don't think it was particularly good, but it exists. And yeah, the Castlevania movies, I think, are well, the TV show, Netflix series, whatever you want to call it. Again, another perfect example of just really good, high quality entertainment based off the back of video games.
And it was true to the source material, but also took its liberties, but in the right spot. Like, it wasn't too obvious that they kind of like went a bit astray.
Yeah,
not too much, but a bit.
Yeah, but it was fitting. It was fitting in the context of the show itself, so that's why it works. I
imagine it's just a hell of a lot easier to carry the tone over from a video game into an animated feature rather than real life. I think a lot of things just don't translate into live action. As you said right at the start of the show, Jim, these video games are a media that we're interacting with and taking part of and part of the story. And to try and lift that and turn it into something else, to mold it into something that it wasn't originally designed to be, just doesn't always work.
Yeah, it's like going back to Hitman. You form an emotional engagement with that character, even though, as I said earlier on, he's a husk. There's not much going on there. But because I want Agent 47 to go left, he's going left. I feel like I'm like I feel like I'm the voice in BioShock, kind of getting him to do what I want him to do. But it's just that sense that there are two different mediums, and the one I always use that just is proof that it doesn't work. Isn't it the Doom movie where they do like the 5-minute first-person shooter, and you just go, no, okay, I know what you're trying to do, but it doesn't work because I kind of want to be doing that. I don't want to be sitting back and watching that.
I have to disagree. I actually think this sequence is one of the things that saves the movie a little bit. And almost everyone I talk to, or everyone I know that is a Doom fan, really thinks, oh, this is well done. The movie sucks. The movie is bad. No question about it. But this sequence rocks.
That sequence to me, it felt like the director was just screaming at you. This is based on a video game. Look, it looks like a video game. And I was just like, honestly, the best part of that movie is when the credits roll and Nine Inch Nails play. And that is, everything prior to that I thought was absolutely awful.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, I think the purpose of this podcast was maybe to try and stray a little bit away from all those awful movies and keep a positive mental attitude towards these things. Listen, guys, I think we've covered most of what we came here to talk about. So we'll wrap things up. I also want to mention we have just hit 1,000 subscribers on the podcast across all the different podcast apps. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, everywhere you can pick up podcasts. We're lagging a little behind on the YouTube channel. So if you could please head on over to the YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button and do all that goodness, thumbs up, leave reviews where you can. It's really, really appreciated. We're trying to push this podcast and get a little bit more reach and find more people and build a sort of community behind it. That'll be a lot of fun. But for now, I would just like to thank Alex for joining us again, Phil for coming on the podcast for the first time. It's good to have you. And also Jim, great. Enjoyed having a bit of crack with yourself.
Thank you very much.
Check out Banterflix Podcast. They're putting together some really good stuff. Very interesting and slightly more highbrow than some of the stuff that we cover. So
check's in the post, Wayne. The check is in the post.
Perfect.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Don't forget to tune in next week. We'll have more video game news. And always, don't forget to save your game.